We are now in part three of our lecture on Marx, and here we're going to discuss class struggle under capitalism, property relations under capitalism, crisis of overproduction under capitalism, and transition from capitalism to communism. It's a capitalism-centered discussion in this part of the lecture. Under capitalism, the class struggle is between the bourgeoisie and the proletarians, unlike the struggle between nobility and serfs during feudalism. On the one hand, bourgeoisie, or the large business owners, are interested in paying as low of a wage as possible to the proletarians for the maximum amount of work from them. On the other hand, the proletarians, or the working class, are interested in receiving as high of a wage as possible for as little work as possible. There's a contradiction of interest here. The bourgeoisie are interested in paying as low of a wage as possible. The working class, or the proletarians, are interested in getting as high of a wage as possible. Marx argues that the bourgeoisie pays the lowest subsistence wages to the workers that it can get away with, while keeping workers maximally productive. The bourgeoisie, who have the power, exploit the working class, who do not have the power. They're usually, in other words, they pay them as little as possible and employ them as much as possible to be as productive as possible. There are usually many candidates for positions in the workforce, and the owners find someone who will do the same labor for a smaller wage. There are many more employees competing for positions than there are employers. And so it's like the employer's market, to put it in capitalist terms. Again, Marx claims that all of this is necessary in order to make maximally efficient the technology and productive capabilities under capitalism. This kind of ruthless competition is the driving force of capitalism and enormous innovations that take place under it. However, argues Marx, a time will come when technology and productive capacities will outstrip the established property relations under capitalism. Just as the feudal title property was at first useful in increasing production during the agricultural revolution and became useless and an obstacle for production after the industrial revolution, the capitalist private property was useful to replace feudal property during the Industrial Revolution, but will become useless and a hindrance to fully realize the new productive capabilities of advancing technology under late capitalism. Due to free trade, competition, and possibilities for enrichment under capitalism, all of which are unleashed compared to the feudal times, the bourgeoisie are constantly revolutionizing and improving technology and productive capacities under capitalism, thereby bringing about its own obsolescence that much faster. The evidence for this is what Marx calls the crisis of overproduction under capitalism. Under capitalism, due to its driving force of competition, both production and wealth become concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. In order to employ bigger, more productive, and requiring more research and development technology, for greater efficiency and competitiveness, larger and larger firms are needed, and smaller and eventually medium-sized firms are competed out of existence. The bourgeoisie, who owned medium and smaller sized firms, join the proletariat or the working class and look for wage work. But more and more employees are replaced with machines in the process called automation, accelerated in our times by artificial intelligence. The army of the unemployed grows larger and larger, driving the wages of the remaining employed even lower. The crux of the problem during late capitalism is this: fewer and fewer people are employed and collect wages. As the wealth becomes concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. And that means that hardly anyone is buying anything. As buying slows down, so does the production, since production is for sale and profits. As production slows down, even fewer people are employed. A smaller version of this is economic recession, while a larger version of this is economic depression. The whole of society comes to a halt. Economists call this the problem of the crisis of demand, while Marx calls this the crisis of overproduction. In order to emphasize that much more can be produced than actually is produced in the late stages of capitalism, while production continues to be for profit. Under capitalism, technology becomes very productive. More is produced than can be consumed, and more importantly, technology simplifies and replaces labor with machines. If the labor force is smaller and is paid less, then products will not be purchased for consumption, and then work will stop, and more people will be unemployed, and the crisis will become worse and worse. Various band-aid solutions will be applied to stimulate demand in the economy, such as government spending from taxes from those who have money, expansion of credit, advertising to stimulate purchase and production of what is not needed, wasteful production that uses more resources, labor and natural resources than is needed, etc. All of this is happening as technology becomes more and more productive, and the need to work is less and less. The crisis of overproduction, as Marx calls it. At some point, argues Marx, the proletarians, the working class, will realize that the capitalist mode of production, under the conditions of private property and for profit, is so productive that they, the working class, no longer need to be exploited. The workers will organize the workplace so that it serves the needs of the workers rather than the needs of the bourgeoisie. Labor will be decreased or become more fulfilling. For this to happen, private property will need to be abolished, and the means of production will be collectively owned and operated. Marx calls this the stage of communism, the key marker of which will be the abolition of private, not personal, property. Everyone will belong to the same one universal class of workers or proletarians. At that point, exploitation will stop, economic classes, will cease to exist, and history will end. We will enter post-history.